I really wanted to like this movie, but unfortunately as a lifelong Twilight fan, I spent the whole 2 hours wondering why the vampire wasn't sparkling. Hey y'all, SnarkyJay cosplay here. Just so you know, that intro, I am totally kidding. So I finally got to see Nosferatu last night, and I really didn't know what to expect from this one. My only exposure to Nosferatu was this bit in an episode of SpongeBob.
Then who was flickering the lights? Nosferatu!
So I'm going to preface this review with saying that I have not seen the original, so the remake is not going to be compared to the original in any way. I'm just talking about my experience with this movie, and to be honest, I have spent so long being disappointed by movies that were overhyped on the internet, and I thought Nosferatu was fucking amazing. I would give Nosferatu a solid 8 out of 10 rating. I am so willing to defend that. I know people on the internet seem to have either like, this movie's the second coming of Christ, or this is the biggest and weirdest piece of shit I've ever seen. But hear me out, I really think it deserves an 8 out of 10. So Nosferatu is not your average vampire story, which is kind of what I thought it was. Essentially, Nosferatu is both, yes, a malevolent vampiric spirit, but he is also the embodiment of a young woman's shame and temptation, and this is actually played out brilliantly. I would say one of the great things about 2024's Nosferatu is that the pacing is actually phenomenal. The story gets going, it's laid out very clearly that this is the plot. The film has a runtime of just a little over 2 hours. I didn't find any points where the film dragged, nor did I ever feel like, please let this be over. And one of the great reasons for that is that this film, to me, feels like true horror. See, in recent years, I feel like horror has gone more and more away from actually scaring people and more into startling people. I really don't like horror films that are just full of jump scares. I also don't like horror films that are just gore fests, so slashers have never been my thing. I really like more intellectual horror, where they kind of drag you in with a complicated story, a mystery, a legend, a ritual, and then they sort of paint a picture. And instead of just startling you at every turn by having things pop out of corners, what they do is instill a sense of fear through tension, through slow-moving cameras in the dark, through a sense of foreboding, and that is genuinely the sense through 99% of this movie. It is a marathon of being freaked the fuck out, which to me is a perfectly executed horror movie. And another thing that makes Nosferatu so great, of course, is the performances. Bill Skarsgård plays the terrifying Count Orlok, and honestly, it's hard to even tell that Bill Skarsgård is this character. I kind of didn't know what Skarsgård was gonna do with this role, but he completely disappears in it. Count Orlok is fucking horrifying. And of course, I would say most of that is chalked up to the prosthetic work. If I'm not mistaken, they actually had 6 or 9 different prosthetics on his face alone, prosthetic fingers, this fantastic costume, and I was reading trivia about the film, and essentially they wanted to make him look like a long-dead Transylvanian nobleman, and that's kind of the vibe you get. You don't get like this cheesy vampire look. He genuinely looks like this undead thing from a time lost long ago. He is fascinatingly scary. So yes, part of the brilliance of Count Orlok in this film can be chalked up to the makeup and wardrobe department, but a big part of it, and I would say most of it, is carried by how absolutely terrifying Bill Skarsgård is in this role. His body language is freaky as shit. He could lower his voice like an entire octave and get this gravelly, disturbing voice with these rasping breaths. I mean, you genuinely feel like you're looking at the visage of death itself. He feels frail, but also incredibly powerful and imposing, where you never feel like, yeah, I got his gist. He feels just shrouded in mystery. He is so freaky and so brilliant. And I would be remiss to not mention what a brilliant performance Lily Rose Depp gives in this one. I am not entirely fair to Nepo babies, to be completely honest. If you're in Hollywood and mommy and daddy are famous, I pretty much think that they bought your fame. And so I didn't have any faith in her performance, but she played it so brilliantly. She was absolutely feral when she needed to be, when she was in the throes of this weird connection with this monster, and she played frail and delicate when she needed to be. If you buy into the idea of almost a possession of sorts, then the body language and the performance by Lily Rose Depp is incredibly accurate, and it works so well. And one of the things that I want to note about her character is that it seems like this sort of movie, which is kind of a gothic horror type thing, right? It seems like it wouldn't have much character development, but her character actually goes on this brilliant journey from this woman having this thing plaguing her and being ignored to, spoiler alert, I'm going to give a spoiler. There is going to be a spoiler in the next like 2 seconds. So if you don't want to hear a spoiler, click out. Spoiler alert. She goes from being tormented by this thing helplessly and basically being ignored by the people around her to finally making a choice on her own as a woman in this time, making the choice to sacrifice herself to end this thing's reign of terror. And it's also a really fascinating story because we see that despite the fact that Count Orlok is horrifying and has obviously kind of dug his claws into somebody that was fragile, we also see that there's this weird connection between the two of them that might make people uncomfortable, but it really gives way to the idea of a possession, of a sort of parasitic connection between these two. It's absolutely fucking fascinating. Other great performances in this film come from Aaron Taylor Johnson and Nicholas Hoult, but honestly, the guy who stole the show for me, and I think he tends to do it in a lot of the movies that he's in, Willem Dafoe. He is absolutely brilliant in this film, and he really kind of walks this line between somebody that you think might be brilliant and somebody that you think might be a little mad. Another great thing about Nosferatu, I absolutely love the wardrobe. I already mentioned Count Orlok's makeup, but the wardrobe choices within this film are absolutely fabulous. They feel very true to the time, the 1830s, and I love a good period piece that does a good job of really sinking you into that time period. Honestly though, I would say the real beauty behind Nosferatu are the effects used and the cinematography. I would say that the colors in this film are absolutely brilliant because we get scenes that are supposed to be cold and foreboding, and they're almost undersaturated color-wise, and you feel that. They create this uncomfortable sensation. Some scenes are so dark you find yourself leaning into the screen, and it's on purpose. You really find yourself like wanting to look deeper into it and becoming part of the cast because now you're about to be afflicted by this thing because you've looked too far in, and I thought it was such a fantastic effect. There are some really good uses of camera moves where it sort of pans around with the character's viewpoint, so you find yourself also almost craning your neck to look and see if Orlok is in that corner. A lot of the effects in this film are actually practical. Like I said, Count Orlok is basically a combination of tons of prosthetics, but they also used more than 2,000 live rats on the set, which sounds incredibly difficult to work with, but also really fucking cool. It's hard to find anything in this movie that doesn't look super legit. There's a scene where Willem Dafoe's character lights a mausoleum on fire, and according to Robert Eggers, that was actually mostly real fire that Willem Dafoe was terrified to be burned by, and it looks so good. Again, I really didn't have any expectations for Nosferatu, but Nosferatu might actually be one of the best horror movies that I've seen in the past 10 years. I would say that Nosferatu is deserving of being called a film and not just a horror movie because it really plays out so well. The plot is delivered excellently. The dialogue is absolutely fantastic. The character development, story, hair, makeup, wardrobe. I would argue that Nosferatu is kind of a must-see and really felt like a cinematic experience. It is sort of a weird movie and it did make me uncomfortable, and not like a scared way, but just like uncomfortable. But sometimes art, I think, is supposed to make us uncomfortable, so I kind of like that it made me uneasy and I was kind of squirming in my seat a little bit. If you don't have a really stark reaction to art, I feel like it didn't do its job. So I would say Nosferatu is a must-watch, and I would recommend it. Don't hold me to that, though. If you watch Nosferatu and you don't like it, that's on you. And that's all from me. I've been SnarkyJay. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. For more SnarkyJay, be sure to check me out on Instagram, and if you'd like to support me, this channel, and my content creation, do check out and consider subscribing to my Patreon for exclusive photo shoot sets and cosplay content. I'll add links to all of those in the description below. And let me know your thoughts on Nosferatu in the comments below.